Chapman and his lass. And now it gives us great pleasure to welcome all the past principals from Penicuik. The 1936 Hunter's lass, Mrs. Greta Hunter and Mr. Hunter. The 1938 Hunter's lass, Mrs. Cora Dempster and Mr. Dempster. The Hunter's lass in 1950, Mrs. Margaret Murray and Mr. Murray. The Hunter and Hunter's lass from 1952, Willie Brown and Mrs. Margaret McInnes. The Hunter and Hunter's lass 1953, Jenny Elliott and Mrs. Marion Brown. The Hunter and Hunter's lass 1955, Mr. Peter Robertson and Mrs. Mary McWillan. The Hunter's lass 1956, Mrs. Maybeth Hart. The Hunter's lass 1957, Mrs. Ella Bloomfield and Mr. Bloomfield. In 1958, the Hunter and Hunter's lass, Mr. James Shaw and Mrs. Etta Dugan. Hunter and lass from 1959, Mr. James Laughlin and Mrs. Pearl Fleming. Penicuik's Hunter in 1960, Mr. Robert Reed. Hunter and Hunter's lass 1962, Mr. John Wilson and Mrs. Myra Lee. The Hunter in 1963, Mr. James Archibald with Mrs. Archibald. In 1964, the Hunter's lass, Mrs. June Huddart and partner. Hunter and Hunter's lass, 1978, Kenny Bell and Mrs. Margaret Bell. Hunter and Hunter's lass, 1979, Mr. Duncan McCallum and Mrs. Caroline Brash. In 1980, the Hunter and Hunter's lass, Mr. Scott Mackay and Mrs. Alison Campbell. Our Hunter and lass in 1981, Mr. Richard McCarthy and Miss Jacqueline Hindle. In 1982, Hunter and Hunter's lass, Mr. Jim May and Miss Fiona McLennan. Hunter and Hunter's lass, Mr. George Delaney and Miss Hazel Johnson. In 1984, Mr. Donald McIntosh and Mrs. Denise McIntosh. Hunter and Hunter's lass, 1985, Mr. Alan Hutchison and Miss Susan Hankinson. Our right-hand supporters for this year, 1986, Mr. Mr. Martin Archibald and Mrs. Laverne Robertson. And now, the stars of the show, our Hunter and Hunter's Lass elect 1986, Derek Wilson and Julie Lang. Can we now ask all the visiting principals and past principals to make a ring right round the floor. It's a circle waltz led off by our Hunter and Lass, Julie and Derek. Can we ask all the visiting principals to join in, please? And now everybody on the floor. Everybody on the floor, please. Ladies and gentlemen. And now we ask Derek and Julie. Only the Penicuik principals on the floor at the moment, please. Only the Penicuik principals on the floor at the moment. This is the hunting show by Penicuik's Hunter and his Lass. Everybody else stand back, please. Give them plenty room. They need it.